Hey everyone, Reese here once more from the award-winning YouTube channel Control-Alt-Reese. Okay, well, I haven't actually won any awards, but one day, I'm sure my channel will win some kind of award, maybe. Maybe. Anyway, if there's anyone out there listening who hands out awards, just consider that I'm in the running. Anyway, so I released my last Ramble last weekend. Or was it the weekend? It wasn't, was it? It was on the Monday, I think, because I released 2 videos on the Sunday and I didn't want to release 3 things at the same time. And as I said in that episode, I didn't really want to sort of make a big thing about it or make a big public announcement or kind of promote it on my social media or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of see how it did. And within half an hour of that going out, all of a sudden I started getting messages from people saying, "Oh, I really enjoyed the Ramble, keep it up." I was like, "Oh," and a couple of people saying, "So, I see you've got a podcast now." Still not referring to this as a podcast. It's a predominantly audio offering. But yeah, so I guess I'll do another one. Well, I guess I am doing another one right now. So yeah, based on some of the other feedback. One person did point out to me the subtitles. There was some weirdness going on with the automatic captions on YouTube. Now, captions is something I actually feel quite strongly about when it comes to YouTube videos. It's something that I've put a lot of work into on my own channel, on my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese. And it's a conversation I've had with some other creators, and people seem to get quite worked up about it for some reason. Me saying that people should get their subtitles in order is an affront to their very existence or whatever. So I'm not going to have that debate today. I'm not going to talk too much about YouTube stuff today either, like I did in the previous one. Obviously, the previous one I spent 20 minutes talking about the importance of getting to the point. And it took me pretty much the entire episode to get to that point. So there you go. Do as I say, not as I do. Or don't even do as I say. Just do what you want. Yeah, but so back onto the subtitles. Someone pointed out that there was some weirdness going on with those. And I think the reason that stood out is because there are, I think 25% of my audience watch my videos on Control-Alt-Reese with the subtitles enabled, which is quite surprising. I have some quite a big audience. I think I have people in India. And I think like my biggest non-English speaking audience is actually in Germany, interestingly enough. And obviously people find those subtitles useful. There's a lot of people watching on mobile devices who don't want to have the volume up and still want to know what's going on. And I guess the idea with this, as I said before, this is a predominantly audio offering, and so for the foreseeable future I won't be putting any work into those captions. This is available on all of the kind of podcasting platforms. I've now got it set up from Anchor FM, which is kind of the main landing page, and which is the service that I use to upload this. It's uploaded from Anchor FM to Spotify and Apple and Amazon and Google and all of that stuff. And I kind of intended it as a thing that people would kind of have on in the background rather than sort of sitting and staring at a YouTube window actively watching. But you never know, that might change in the future. I might even add video in the future, much further down the line. But ultimately, I don't want there to be a high barrier to me making these. I kind of, the whole purpose is that I sit down, I record. I have a couple of notes in front of me. I sit down, I record, and then I just upload it as is. Any kind of higher barrier to entry than that is going to detract from time that I want to be spending on videos. And speaking of which, I've got a project going on at the minute, a video, and it's going to be a longer one. A lot of my sort of recent videos on my channel have been around the 10-minute mark, and it's not a deliberate decision on my part. I know a lot of people make their videos kind of barely over the 8-minute limit because they want to put mid-roll ads in them. I don't tend to put mid-roll ads in my videos unless they're much longer ones. Sometimes I go back and add them to older videos if they're still doing well. Advertising is annoying ultimately, and I don't really want to bombard people with ads, and we do have control over that as creators. I think that's something that people don't understand, and I think it's a big secret that people don't like to talk about. If we want to, we can just remove all of the mid-roll ads from a video. Arguably, YouTube will promote videos that make it money over videos that don't, and so there is a kind of an incentive from a kind of visibility point of view to add lots of ads into videos. But I've got my audience, my channel's growing, I'm quite happy with it, so putting ads every 2 minutes just for that reason, it's going to, the negatives are going to outweigh the positives, aren't they? So anyway, that's kind of the reason for that. But yes, video length. Yeah, a lot of people make videos kind of around the 10-minute mark for that reason. I think in my case, that's kind of where my attention span kind of is. That's the kind of length of video that I like to watch. And when it comes to writing scripts and editing, that seems to be about the kind of the sweet spot for me as well, as far as my attention span is concerned with actually putting these videos together. And that's why a lot of them recently have been that length. But this most recent one, I don't want to talk too much about it, and I don't want to talk too much about the actual content of it, and I don't really want to give away any spoilers about what it's about. But it's one of my kind of bigger, more documentary style videos. Obviously, I've done some stuff on the Atari Panther in the past. I really need to do a proper big one on that. Stuff like the Atari 2800 and that kind of thing, where I've really dug into a lot of kind of original research and stuff from back in the day. And kind of put together the definitive video on the subject. It's slightly newer than the Atari stuff, the actual topic of it, but it's a household name which you will have heard of. You probably even used it if you're kind of a similar age to me, or even younger. But yeah, I think I'm already giving too much away. Anyone who knows kind of what I've been playing with lately will probably work it out. But it's a video that doesn't exist. The history and the story of this particular thing isn't on YouTube. There is quite a good video from another big creator, which it kind of talks a bit about the kind of the later. It does touch on the early days, and then talks a bit about kind of the later evolution of this thing. But not the origins of it, and not kind of showing what that was all about. So I'm really, really passionate about this one. It's going to be a huge amount of work. It's going to be a longer video, probably getting on for sort of 25 minutes. But there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of sort of first-hand research and a lot of information, and yeah, it's cool. So yeah, there's that. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about that next time, if that's closer to completion or even finished. The rate I'm working on it at the minute, it shouldn't be too much longer until it's actually done. Although I need to record some bits to camera as well, and I am waiting for something to arrive that I've had to order from the other side of the world, to just literally just to hold up on camera just while I talk about it. So, but there you go. That's kind of the lengths I go to with my videos. That's also kind of the stuff that I can justify by having patrons and advertising on the videos, and obviously doing the sponsored videos with people like EcoFlow. Just having a little bit of money kind of coming in as a result of those means that I can go out and kind of buy those extra bits, and ultimately it's something that I'm only going to use as a visual aid for a couple of minutes in a video, but it's part of the story, and just finding a picture on the internet and showing that as like a slideshow or whatever is to me, it's a bit half-arsed, I think. I think the channels that go above and beyond to do these things properly are the ones that really stand out, and that's something I've always kind of tried to do with my channel. I don't know if people agree with that, but there we go. So yes, this is going so much better now. I've got actual bullet points in front of me. The EcoFlow sponsorship, that's something that I've got in my bullet points. I don't know if I want to talk about that. I did another sponsored video with EcoFlow, and the reason I did that was the same reason that I did the first one, because I've been looking at them. Obviously, they sent me the River 2, which is the smallest model that they do last year, and I've been using that ever since as part of my solar setup. I want to point out that talking about this kind of outside of that sponsored video isn't part of the contract. It isn't something that I've agreed to. I'm not getting paid for this, and if I had serious problems with those units, I would quite happily sit here and tell you and just say, no, actually, they're a load of crap. I just said those things for the video because I wanted a free one. And actually, someone did ask me just the other day, is all the stuff in the video true? Because I'm thinking of buying one. And it's quite sad, really. It's totally understandable that people would have that kind of level of distrust with YouTubers trying to flog them stuff all the time. And that's the reason I don't really like to do those. But hey, they wanted to send me something that I was interested in buying anyway, again. And yeah, I just had to do a 10-minute long, honest review of it, which is what I did. The fans, they need to sort those fans out. I know these things are built to a price, but I mean, come on, this thing's like 750 quid, and you plug it in and put anything more than the lightest of loads on it, and it sounds like a bloody jet taking off. And you can put like a, you know, Noctua fan in there, which they're not expensive, they're not hugely expensive specialist things, you know, but yeah, it's kind of strange that they didn't prioritise that. And I've had a bit of a back and forth with their customer service people who have actually, not customer service people, they're sort of social media advertising people, and apparently they have fed that back to the engineering team, and whether that will result in anything, I don't know, but it's a real shame, because otherwise I think it's a really excellent unit, and I'm really happy to recommend it to people. But yeah, when anyone asks me, it's like, if the fan noise is going to be an issue, if you're going to be using this thing right next to your head like I do, you know, you're going to have to change the fan for a Noctua. Not difficult, but and also there is the potential risk with that of invalidating the warranty. They haven't put any kind of seals or special screws or anything that you need to break to take it apart, so I'm not quite sure how they would tell, as long as you keep the original fan and swap it back should you need to send it back. But still, it's something to bear in mind. Obviously, for me, getting these things for free, it's not such a big issue taking it apart and fiddling with it. But if you spent quite a lot of your hard-earned money on it, I can see why you would be a lot more reluctant. I don't think I would, to be honest. So, but anyway, yeah. So that's kind of the preliminary, introductory housekeeping stuff. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're 11 minutes in. So I had a topic in mind, and I nearly talked about this in the first video that I did last time, but I wanted to keep it kind of short and sweet and to the point, so I thought I'd save it for this one. And that topic is hoarding. Is a bit of a dirty word in the world of collecting. So when I was a kid, I remember going to my grandma's house, and she was a hoarder. To put it bluntly, she wasn't horrific. She wasn't one of these people where you just couldn't move in their house. But it very, very, very much kind of stood out that she had all of these kind of piles of newspapers. And one thing that she was really kind of into was buying like brand new bed linen when it was on offer. You know, bed sheets and that kind of stuff. And there were just like packs of those just lying around the house just in case she needed them. Of course, she never used them. You know, she had stuff dating back to the war and all sorts of stuff. They'd lived in that house forever. And yeah, as a kid, it never really kind of stood out to me as a strange thing. And then my dad was the same. I say was, sadly he's no longer with us, but you know, our house itself was actually kind of immaculately tidy because my mum was a very, and still is, a very, very tidy person. But he'd had sheds and garages and outbuildings, and, you know, like our drive had old cars on it that he was working on, and, you know, the shed was full of weird little offcuts of wood and stuff like that he kept in case he might need them one day for projects, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of, I guess it's kind of easy to see that behaviour in myself and where I get that from. And I am very much a hoarder, you know. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Well, I'm kind of ashamed to admit that. But I know I have a problem, and recognising the problem is kind of the first step towards dealing with it. So yeah, I've got my little room here that I make my YouTube videos in that's just kind of full of stuff, mainly Atari stuff, because I see it on the internet and I buy it, and that gives me a little rush of endorphins that makes me happy, and then eventually it arrives and I'm like, play with it for 5 minutes and it goes on the shelf. Or when you have a YouTube channel like I do, it's quite easy to justify that stuff, because obviously you can say, well, I'll make a YouTube video about this and people will be interested in it. So yeah, it is what it is. I've kind of, in the back of my mind, I've kind of reached a place where I think I'm going to start thinning some stuff out. There's a lot of junk in our kind of sheds and our garage that I think I'd probably quite like to get a skip and just get rid of some of that stuff, because it has no monetary value and it's not stuff that I'm ever going to use. And some of the actual stuff here that's kind of part of my collection, I think I should start selling. Particularly as I have the Mister now. I've got the Mister multi-system, which is a system that can kind of... Oh, the technical explanation of what the Mister is. Basically, you can run loads of different cores on it, and it's kind of a very accurate... I'm going to use the word emulation, I'm sorry. But it's a very accurate emulation of various different sort of 8 and 16-bit systems and kind of stuff, all the way up to the original PlayStation, in fact. To the point where it's so much easier and so much more convenient, and other than kind of tinkering with the original hardware and fixing it and kind of making videos about that, once I've reached that point, it's like, why bother keeping the original hardware, you know? Especially, I mean, there's stuff like the Atari ST that I had as a kid, and there's kind of the tactile, you know, experience of using that as a computer in and of itself, which kind of has a lot of nostalgia for me. But then there's other stuff. I mean, I've got like Nintendo Famicom stuff. I never had a NES as a kid. I bought it because I thought it all looked cool. I like the branding on the boxes and that kind of thing. But ultimately, I've got no connection to it. And if I want to play those games, I can play them, you know, perfectly 100% accurately, you know, replicated on the Mister on a modern screen, with all the kind of the trappings and the modern comforts that make life so much easier. And I think I'm getting to an age where I just don't have time to kind of mess around. Certainly not for you know, playing a quick game of something. You know, like I say, I still like fixing the original hardware, and I'll still continue to make videos about that because I like buying stuff that needs work and returning it to a working state. But I really do need to get into the habit of kind of moving some of that stuff on once I'm done with it. So yeah, I guess what this was all building up to was my Retro Computer Museum video that the Retro Computer Museum in Leicester. And I think one thing that came up at the time, let's start at the beginning. So I went to the Retro Computer Museum in Leicester. There's a really, really nice chap called Dean who's a volunteer there, and he came across my channel, watched a few of my videos, and he reached out to me and invited me to the museum and said, you know, do you want to make a video all about our museum? And of course I said yes. I'd actually never filmed anything kind of on site or kind of away from home at that point. So it was my very first kind of on location filming exercise. And I was really worried about it in the build up to that, you know, I'd mess something up, or obviously I wanted to talk to the founder of the museum, Andy, and kind of get the story behind the museum. And he was like, oh, you know, how do I make sure that the audio's good? You know, I've got to get like wireless lapel mics and set up for the interview, and I need like a GoPro so I can do wide angle time-lapse shots of people in the museum using the stuff, and really kind of planned the whole thing out in my head before I started. Took multiple batteries and a power bank so I could make sure that everything was charged up, multiple SD cards, and I'm a massive overthinker when it comes to these things, but that video came out really nicely, if I do say so myself. It's one of my favourites that I've done on my channel, and I was really pleased with how that came together. And I think all of the kind of the hard work and the planning up front really paid off. So, and then of course I went on and I did the Northwest Computer Museum a bit later on. Obviously they were a bit earlier on in their journey. In fact, the museum wasn't even open yet. But I went up there and obviously kind of spoke to the founder of the museum and you know, all that same stuff. And that one also came out really nicely. In fact, that museum is open now, and I do have an invitation to go back, and I am going to go back and cover that at some point when I get a free weekend just to go up there. But one aspect of that Leicester Museum video was a tour of their storage unit. So they're on kind of a small industrial estate in Leicester, and there's like a big warehouse that's part of the same estate, which they rent out, and they filled it with basically 15 years worth of donations that they've had. And if you've seen that video, you'll see that they've got like shelves and shelves of, you know, boxes of Atari STs and Amigas and BBC Micros and Commodore 64s, and they've got some rarer stuff. They've got Commodore PETs and you know, all of that kind of stuff there as well. I probably spent over an hour in there with Dean, just kind of looking at stuff and kind of poking around, and him telling me the stories of how they kind of got these things and the work that they'd done to kind of fix them and preserve them, remove potentially leaky batteries and stuff like that. And of course, because I was trying to sort of preserve SD card space and preserve battery, I didn't record all of that. I probably recorded about 20 minutes. Maybe half an hour's worth, and then obviously when I edited that down, that became sort of 5 or 6 minutes of the kind of bigger video. So there's an awful lot of stuff that was kind of talked about that didn't make it to the video, and I thought it was great. You know, I really enjoyed like LGR's videos when he went to Computer Reset, that huge computer warehouse in Texas. And just seeing all that stuff and going through that, and you kind of go through the video with a fine-tooth comb, so trying to see what you can spot on the shelves, and like, oh, what's that? What have they got there? And so I thought people would have a similar experience with my video. And the feedback from that, the initial feedback when it went out to patrons, and then when it first went public for sort of the first day or so, was all really positive. Until I started to get the odd comment about, but why have they got all of this stuff? This is the reason that collectors can't get hold of stuff, because people are hoarding it like this, and all of that kind of thing. And I was quite surprised at first. I know I shouldn't have been. I really should have anticipated that reaction, especially as a collector myself. And obviously I've paid quite high prices for things, and if there was more of that stuff available, then the prices wouldn't be quite so high. But yeah, it's I'm not sort of recording this and sat here because I'm going to try and sort of justify their position. But I did pin a comment on that video, basically explaining sort of some of the conversation that I'd had with Dean. A lot of it boiled down to just kind of volunteer time. They're really, it's a very popular museum. It's kind of very easily accessible from for the people of Leicester, and it's very busy at the weekends. And the volunteers that work there, they have day jobs, and they don't have a huge amount of time. They've got to prioritise kind of fixing the stuff that they have and keeping it running, and sort of prioritising having machines ready to go when stuff breaks for the actual museum itself, as the kind of the visitor experience, so to speak. And one thing that he did talk about is obviously that they've been doing this for 15 years, and quite often, more often than not, the stuff that they were donated came from people who were basically just going to take it down the dump. And I've recently had a very similar experience with the Sinclair video that I did. If you remember, there was a chap called Richard who was a friend of a friend, and he sadly passed away, lived alone, and it fell to his sister, who is his kind of his only surviving family member, to sort out his stuff. And he was a man of very many hobbies. He was apparently into astronomy and model trains and engineering, tinkering. One of those people, which I did explain in the video. And they found all of these old computers, and his sister didn't know what to do with them. What do you do when you come across a load of stuff that you don't really understand or know about? And she was just going to take them down a dump. She just kind of dumped them in the corner of the garage, just ready to go. Whole house to sort out. That's kind of the priority. And it was only when a friend's dad kind of got roped in. Well, not roped in. No, that's unfair. But when he kind of got involved and was kind of helping out with the house clearance, that he spotted this pile of computers, and he was like, "Oh, I know a guy who fixes old computers. What are you going to do with these?" And she said, "Well, basically, I was going to take them down the dump. I don't know what to do with them. I mean, they're old, they're obsolete. Surely nobody wants them." So he took them, and that's how I ended up with them. Now, obviously, that was a one-time thing. That was a one-off. But if you're running a museum and it's quite well known, and it's the one and only sort of computer museum in the town, and it's well established, that kind of thing is going to happen. What, on a weekly basis? Maybe, well, on a monthly basis at least. And over the course of 15 years, you're going to end up with a hell of a lot of stuff. And it's what to do with that stuff, And it's having that conversation with people with, would it be okay to sell this to kind of raise some funds for the museum? Now, if it was me, like if I, got hit by a bus tomorrow or whatever, and I've got all this crap in my house, I'd like to think that my wife would sell it and sort of benefit from that. It would be a huge undertaking. But ultimately, if it did end up sat on a warehouse shelf in the back room of a museum somewhere forever, in the case that they might use it, whatever, I don't care. But obviously, on that same kind of vein, if they wanted to sell it to help with the running costs and to help with improving their sort of visitor experience and their educational offering, if the money would help in that way, then yeah, fine. Even if they used it to pay the rent or keep the lights on or whatever, ultimately that's fine. It's not mine anymore. I'm not around to sort of kind of have a say in that. But not everyone feels the same way, and when someone kind of passes away, it's kind of hard to sort of know what their wishes were, and yeah, I think the trouble is, like a lot of things on the internet, people like to pick a side and kind of stick to their side, and actually there's a lot of nuance to it, and ultimately they're paying a huge amount of money to store all of this stuff, and evidently they feel like they don't have the manpower to either sort it out and sell it, and they don't know if they kind of have permission to sell it from the people that donated it. I know that probably sounds quite silly to some people, but that was essentially kind of the recurring theme as I was doing that tour, and as I was kind of looking at those machines. And I know I've had similar conversations with other people who are in that kind of situation, and it's quite a common thing. The other thing that I want to talk about, and like I say, it sounds like I'm kind of taking their side and defending them here, and that's I'm just kind of exploring and talking about the options and kind of the different sides of the argument. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, they're on this big industrial estate, and there are a few different buildings on this estate. And there's quite a big office building which is just over the road from them. And they were saying that should that building become available, they'd want to move everything into that. So they'll stop paying the rent on the small unit that they have and the big warehouse unit, and just move everything into this big office building. And once in this big building, they'd like to do like educational workshops and stuff. So they'll have a whole room full of BBC micros, and they'll do, like I think the museum down in Cambridge has one, and Bletchley Park, I think, have one as well. And I think the Northwest Computer Museum, I think I saw some pictures. I think they've got something similar set up now as well. And so essentially you'd have a classroom like a 1980s, early 90s classroom with BBC micros with cub monitors, and you'd have a whiteboard at the beginning, printed educational material, and just teach local school kids how to program in BASIC and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of where all of that came from. And those skills are genuinely useful. Once you've learnt kind of the logic skills and how a program is laid out, and variables and loops, and God, I mean, I'm a developer in my day job, so that stuff isn't useless. That's information that can go on and be applied to modern stuff as well, because it has its roots in that stuff, and understanding those fundamentals is really, really important, and it's a great place to start from. So yeah, you think, they've got 20 BBC micros on a shelf doing nothing because they've only got one set up in the museum, but actually if they move into that building next year, all of a sudden they'll be using those. Same with like the Atari STs, for example. That was another conversation I had with Dean. He was saying, well, we want to set up a music studio, and we want MIDI keyboards and samplers and all of that kind of stuff, and we want to connect them up to the Atari STs and have Cubase running on them, and have like a studio where kids can come in and learn like the basics of the early days of music production and that kind of stuff. And I think when you start to consider that angle, it's like, well, actually, yeah, if they did, it would benefit them to sell all of this stuff in the short term. A lot of it's quite valuable at the minute. They'd sell it, they'd get the money in, they'd be able to sort of pay the rent and pay the bills and that kind of stuff. And ultimately, they wouldn't have to pay so much to store it all, and they wouldn't need to take up so much volunteer time to maintain it all. So it's a very logical decision in the short term. But actually, in the longer term, it's like, well, actually, if you've got aspirations of using all of these machines further down the line for this kind of stuff, it's going to be a bit of a pain to have to buy it all back after you've sold it. And it's probably going to end up costing you a lot more in the long run. So, yeah, interesting stuff to consider, and just something I wanted to talk about. There's nothing specific that's kind of prompted that. It's just a kind of random thought that's been making its way, floating around my brain for the past few months, that I just wanted to get out there. So yeah, all interesting stuff. So I think we're coming up to the half an hour mark now. My neighbour, I should have mentioned this right at the beginning, I don't know why I didn't, but yeah, my neighbour's actually digging up their entire garden at the minute with some heavy machinery, so apologies if there's some noise in the background. I'll try to fix that in the edit if it is a problem. There's like some high-pitched drilling and stuff going on, like a pneumatic, like concrete breaker, pneumatic drill thing. But anyway, I think that's all I have for this particular ramble. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for all of the positive feedback that I had on that first episode. It sounds like this is definitely going to be a thing going forwards, which is great. I've also had a few people from a few kind of smaller YouTube channels who I kind of talk to, some really good friends of mine, ask if I'm going to be having guests on the show and that kind of thing, and maybe a bit of back and forth. And I think when it comes to podcasts, I like the ones that have multiple hosts. You know, there's only so much you can listen to one guy alone in his bedroom rambling on about nonsense, and I am very, very acutely aware of that. So I think once I'm a bit more confident with this and I have a bit more direction and a bit more kind of into the flow of things, I certainly will be sort of chatting with some other people, which will be quite interesting. Oh, and one other thing I didn't cover in the preamble, the ramble preamble. Hey, that's what we should call it, shouldn't we? At the beginning, the ramble preamble. Yeah, one thing I didn't cover in that. Apparently, there is another podcast called Reese Rambles. It's RWSE, and she released 2 episodes back in July of last year, and that was it. That was kind of the culmination. That was the peak of her entire podcasting career. So, female Reese, if you are listening to this, apologies for stealing your name. Although to be fair, I have been using that name for my second YouTube channel for a couple of years now. If you want to be a guest on the show, get in touch. Yeah, you know, the more Reese's, the better. So, yes, thank you very much to everyone for listening. I will see you again next time. If you have any feedback, I have a Discord server. How do you get to that? If you go to my website, control-alt-reese.com, there's a link to my Discord server on there. There's an invite on there. Also, there's the YouTube comments on the second channel, although, like I say, this is kind of a predominantly audio thing for the podcast platforms and whatnot. And I think that's all I have to say for this one. And yeah, I'll see you on the Control-Alt-Reese YouTube channel, and I will see you next time for the next ramble, maybe. Bye!